I'm CK. Tonight, in the spirit of never having too many VCOs, we're going to put together a Hyperfist 3 from Beast-tek. It is, to quote them, it's a post-apocalyptic wavetable VCO with resonant lo-fi feedback delay, screechy spacey drones, wild glitches, in addition to functioning as a standard wavetable VCO. So, sounds like it might be a sonically exciting piece of gear. Looking forward to putting it together. Hope you enjoy the video. Here's the bag, and it's a beefier bag than many I've put together, so that's interesting. And it looks like it's anti-static all over, which, again, for shipping is probably good. Let's see, we start out with the circuit board and the panel. Tilt my light a little bit. Come on. So we've got a display here. Looks like algorithm selector, quantum, I don't know what that means, auto, hi-fi, mod, fist, frequency, clock rate, out, clock in, frequency CV, modulation CV, and fist CV, and we'll figure out what that is. This, like the Division 6's boards, this is not metal. It's plastic, fiberglass, composite, whatever, which is neither good nor bad, just interesting. And here are two circuit boards. Construction of the boards looks good, all through hole plated. There's a big controller going here, and that looks like where the pin headers to connect the two boards is going to be. And so the board is labeled Glitchy IO version 1.3 and has the URL. A lot of diodes, that's interesting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 diodes. The resistors do not have, and capacitors do not have values assigned, but they have a build guide online, which I'll bring over in a second, and we'll see how good that is. I'm sure it'll be wonderful. So one thing to note is that the components are not all scrunched together. There's lots of space, which is nice. The boards are big, and of course the panel is big. This is certainly a wide unit. Let's see what else is in here. Here's a bunch of knobs and jacks and switches, which is always fun. I've seen this with other Beast-tek things before. Oh, here's some. I think this is probably some plexiglass, clear plexiglass to cover the display, and there might even be a control there. I'm looking at that. No, there's not a control. But something may go. Something goes through there. One thing that is very good about Beast-tek is, look at these knobs, they've got real brass inserts in them. That's good. The other thing is they use, these are big pots for eurorack. I mean, these are higher voltage pots than eurorack will ever need. These would not be out of place in a 15-watt guitar amp, tube amp. So that's interesting that they chose to go with these big hefty pots. Again, not technically, in my opinion, needed for eurorack, because eurorack's power demands are so low. So here's the Hyperfist processor. I'm sure it's got a lot of microcode in it. Here's a TI chip, a TL07 4CN, that's an op amp. Digital display components. Eurorack power cable. long pin header strip. It's interesting. He is choosing to use both the rectangular style pin headers and the round style pin headers. That's just interesting that he chose to combine both of them. Nothing else in that bag. There is the URL to get help if you need it. And here we have all the components we're going to solder. We'll put them in this bin. Dump them out and take a look, see if there's anything particularly unique in here. We'll separate the various pieces. 2, 4, 6, 8 diodes. Gosh, that's a lot of diodes. They have a nice power connector. In other words, they're not using just bare pins, it's keyed, so it's much more difficult to make a mistake. That is a big old capacitor for eurorack's 35 volt 470 microfarad. That's a big cap. And that is a big power transistor. Huh. I didn't see a heat sink anywhere, so I don't know if it's going to need one. Oh, here's a... Ooh, that's a 20 megahertz clock chip. Interesting. And more big old caps. Huh. I mean, I like them, but I was just not using enough power to take big old caps like that. So, we'll take a look. Let's look at the build guide now real quickly. Bill of materials. Oh, first thing we're going to do is we're going to do the pin headers. Great. Oh, I see what they're doing. Oh, he's doing that. Instead of an IC socket, we're going to cut up the round style pin header and make IC sockets out of that. Okay, fine. Nice pictures. Good pictures to show you if you've got it correct. Let me get the soldering iron heating up and we'll start putting this Hyper Beast together. First step is to cut the machine pin headers, that's the round style, to make the sockets for the processor and op amp. Let's count, just to be sure, 17, 18, 19, 20. So let's count. 1, 2, 19, and 20. Interestingly enough, if you don't get this right, if you're off by 1 or 2, you can always cut another pin and do a singleton. Not something I recommend, but you could. Okay, that's enough pins there. Did we? And yeah, we end up with just the right amount after we cut. Must have been a 40 pin strip. See how cleverly I figured that out? See how cleverly I'm not getting it into position correctly? Okay, so the way I do this, the way I solder sockets and pin headers and so on is I will hold it in with my fingers on the back of the board, not really caring about the orientation or fit right now, and I'll do one pin and I'll burn my finger on the back because I'm pressing against that thing, because I always do that because I'm an idiot. Now I look at it from edge on underneath the board, or underneath the board. I heat that pin up again and then I can get it exactly flush. Look at both ends. Now I can solder it on down when it's time. So let me do the other one same way. Now for this one, I'm actually going to take the No, I won't. I'll be fine. Never mind. I was going to take the processor out and put it down on the chips, but I'm not gonna. Looking at this just to be quadruple sure. Oh, dandy. Now we'll do the other smaller one. Looks good. Now we're going to do the timing crystal. And he would like the timing crystal not to sit flush on the board, like he recommends a millimeter above. So I'm going to eyeball it, flip over my solder helper, and use the PCB slot that it has in it to hold the PCB still while I do this. And I'm going to get a bit of solder on my iron, and tack the one leg in place and see if I got a gap, and I do not, because I'm not very, and I know I've got my head in the middle of it, I understand. Okay. Yeah, it's close enough. As long as it's not flush, as long as it has a little airflow on the back, even though a 20 megahertz crystal doesn't need a ton of airflow. But as we can see from the size of the capacitors and the voltage regulator, whoever designed this kit likes to have a good margin of safety. And now we're going to do the pin header for connecting the two boards, the I/O board and the logic board. So now we'll put the voltage regulator in, and again it's a big old voltage regulator. Okay, time for the big chunky diodes. And again, I'm sorry, there are 8 diodes here and there are 3 more diodes here. There's a lot of protection and voltage control that he's doing with diodes. Okay, those diodes are in. And now we're going to do the 22 picofarad ceramics and all the 100 nanofarads, okay? Okay, there's those caps in. Now we're going to do the electrolytics. And now 470, big ol' honkin' cap, which goes in C22. There's not much space there, is there? Huh. It's actually touching the other cap and slightly touching the socket rail. And that can just be a problem based on who the manufacturer of this cap is and what the original layout was designed for from a different manufacturer. See, because again, these, where's my pointy thing? The little 22 pico is touching that cap, which I don't particularly care for, and that's very close. Not quite touching, but within, geez, a couple of thousandths of an inch of touching the socket. Shouldn't be a problem, just awful tight. Okay, now we're going to do power connector. This may just be a typo. It says installed the 10-pin shrouded IC eurorack power socket JP3, but the board is marked JP4. I mean, it's obviously based on the picture. It's obviously in the right place, but and there is no JP4 here. Is there one on this board? Shouldn't be. No. So there's either a misnumbering on the board or a misnumbering in the build guide. But in any event, red stripe is going to go this way. So as the author of the guide says, make sure just double check that you're going to have the power cord oriented properly, so you don't get your negative coming in where you want your positive and vice versa. So same drill, peg one leg down, take a look. Time for testing. Okay. He would like us to power the unit or connect the unit to power and do some testing. So I'm going to plug the cable in, and as he also says, don't do this in your rack with other components plugged in, because if it goes bad, bad things will happen. Fortunately, I don't have to do that. I've got spare Routemaster from Frequency Central lying about, so I just power it from that. Okay, the power supply's on good on the back of the wall. Let me plug the unit in. I use these Frequency Central power supplies for most everything. I find them to be really stable electrically, and they can carry a lot of amperage. So we're going to bring everything up and see what happens. We'll see if any smoke comes out. And we've got lights. So we're good. We've got power. Let's see what he wants us to do. Check IC2 first. Pin 4 and pin 11. And I know I've got the probes backwards, but my fluke will do that. So that's showing I'm getting 28 volts, and it's saying 23 to 24. So we're running a little hot there. Let me see what else. From 4 to ground pin. See what we've got. And I'm getting, again, he's getting 11. I'm getting about 13.9. So again, I'm running hot again. But I'm not too worried about that, because he says 11.4 to 12. And I'm getting 13, but I'm not going to worry about that. So it's a little hot, but I'm not going to stress about that. So let me unplug power. Power is unplugged. We'll watch the LED fade away as the capacitors discharge. Even though, again, with these huge caps on this, it takes a while to fade away. And I'm not going to yank the cable before the LEDs show me that the caps have discharged. Now I'll pull the cable, because we don't need it in there for the rest while we're working. So a 330 ohm resistor, R12. Oh, and see, I didn't look ahead of time. But again, he's showing them standing vertically. I personally prefer resistors lying flat on the board if you can, and he's got plenty of space on this board. It's not as if he's trying to dense pack a bunch of resistors in. Well, these are 22J63s. He's showing 22 224J 100s. Okay, we're going to plug it back in. Plug it back into the wall and try not to hold on to the back of the board when I do that so I don't electrocute myself. We're going to go to pin 11 and 10. And I'm getting 4.7, so that's just about perfect. Good. LED's gone, so we can unplug again. Put all these caps in. Now the remaining 4 330 ohm resistors, and again we're going to be doing these vertically. Okay, I'm going to stop for the evening out. Now the kitty cats have to get fed, so we'll stop. The next step is step 13, and I'm saying that on camera. In case I forget, I can go back and look at it. And now we're on to step 13. Got a couple of resistors to put in. The author of the kit describes a certain way of installing the ICs into these pseudo sockets. I disagree with the way he does it. He would like you to install the chip kind of at a 45-degree angle. In fact, he says 45-degree angle, and then apply pressure to bend the chips in. I prefer to bend the chips in prior to getting them near the socket by pressing them against the side of my workshop workbench. I've been doing that my whole life. So try both mechanisms, try both ways of doing it, and come up with the way you feel comfortable. I will say these strips of material are harder to work with for ICs than a standard socket that's got rectangular slots instead of these circular slots. So that's just as you develop, you will come up with your own ways of doing things. And we look at the board here, and one other thing is C17. He specifically states that it is not populated. So the main board is done, the logical board is done. Now we're going to move on to the pot, jack, and other board. So interestingly enough, important, all components facing the front of the module, which will be this, are mounted on the reverse side, back side without the silk screen. So that means the digital displays, which we have here, which are the next things to go on this side. Not, as you might think, on their component side. And of course with these, you always key on the decimal point dot for positioning them correctly. And this is another fine place where we use our locking tweezers to get a grip on it. I'm trying to make sure they're all aligned. This one at the end, the last one I just did, is a little high. There we go. Click down a little bit. And now they're all aligned with each other. Okay, now we're going to do a whole bunch of diodes. And we'll do those. I'll replay that in fast motion. So before I solder these down, I'm going to look at them kind of edgewise to ensure that I've got the stripe oriented correctly on all of them. Now we can solder them on down. I'm looking for C1 here for this 10 microfarad cap, and I'm not seeing it. There it is. I'm not sure why these resistors need to go on this side of the board. I don't understand it. I'm sure the designer has a reason for that. However, it is, be careful with this because it can be error prone. You may not notice that you're in the wrong hole for the particular resistor, particularly when you get to the ones that are inboard on the board. The other thing I'll point out there is, if you look, there are test points on the board too. That's not where the leads for the resistor go in. You have to double check that you're putting your leads in the resistor holes, not the test lead holes. The other thing I do want to mention, because I'm kind of harping on the stand-up resistor thing, one of the reasons why I don't like stand-up resistors is because if you mishandle the board or something else happens, you can bend them over and then they can ground against something else or short against something else. When they're flat, as in a standard circuit board, they're not going to do that. You can't move them. It's like these diodes, they can't move, but stand-up resistors can. And that's why, one of the reasons why I'm not a big fan of them. Now we've got 6 1Ks, and they all go on the back too. Okay, so that's all the resistors on the board. The only thing I'll point out is for R11 and R9, they're very close to the solder pads for diode D11. So just make sure you don't accidentally bridge those two solder points, because you'll be sad if you do that. Now we've got to put the pin headers in, and the pin headers are going to go on the silkscreen side, which is unusual, as we know. I'm sorry I had to move away because I don't have my light position quite right, so I was getting some glare. Oops, that hopped away pretty fast. Oh, look at that, huh? As I'm looking at his picture, he's got this cap laying down, and I do not. Did he say to lay that cap down? He did not say to lay that cap down. And I don't know if I left enough. I didn't leave any slack in the leads to lay that cap down. Ah, he should have said that. I'm going to see if this will actually fit together. Yeah, that'll fit together without that laying down, I think. Yeah, it will. It just barely will make it. But he should have, and it wasn't in the picture on that assembly step, because there is no picture on that assembly step. Well, that's irritating. I'm gonna heat these up and see if I can get a little play out of them. Okay, I got about a 45-degree bend out of it with the amount of lead that I was able to pull through there, and I still have good contact, so I think it'll be fine. But again, there's no picture of that in the step where you install that cap. You don't get to an actual picture showing you that cap laying down until step 4, and you installed it in step 1. So just a little feedback, you may want to call out that you really do want to get that cap laid down. Okay, now we've got one component left. We've got the LED. I'm sure when we get around to putting the panel on, we'll address that. Now we're going to go into all the mechanical bits. So first we're going to get a couple of M3 screws. That's 2. And 2 standoffs. And we're going to do the standoffs like so. Screw going through the board on the non-silkscreen side. And the hole is not quite big enough. I wonder why these holes aren't big enough. I'm just double checking to make sure I picked up the right screw, and yes I did. But no, that's the screws we've got. Let me go grab my other set of screws. I mean, they're M3, so the diameters of course should be the same. No, these holes just aren't, these holes aren't drilled out big enough for M3. That's annoying. I'm gonna go clean these holes out a little bit with a small drill bit, so I'll be back in a couple of minutes after I get this so the screws will go through the holes. I'm going to go ahead and double check the holes on the master board, and same thing, they need to be enlarged too. Okay, the holes should be opened up enough. I still need to coax them through a little bit, but that's okay. Even though, again, we shouldn't have had to widen these screw holes anyway. And then I'll put the spacers on, and then I'll widen the holes on the other board. Now I'm going to turn the cameras off while I open up this hole. Okay, now it's fun time. Now it's time to mount all the pots and switches and jacks, and the author of the kit rightly says, do not solder anything. Put things on the board without soldering them so you can mount the front panel appropriately without things getting all cattywampus on you. So we want to put dust caps on the back of the rotary, on the back of the pots, and they have orientation, which you'll see because they've got little teeth that go between the legs of the pot. There's 2 little notches right here. There's a cutout and 2 little notches, and those go between the leads on the pot. Got 3 switches, single pole, single throw. Oh gosh, these pins got really damaged during shipping. Huh. So, except fortunately they're not control pins. So this is the rotary encoder, and its pins are tweaked too. But that's another thing, and this is something that you'll see me do that I don't recommend you do. I'm not going to put the washers on, and I'm only going to slightly tighten the panel nuts because, again, my gear does not go a-traveling. My gear sits comfortably in the studio. And again, now we get the LED. Where did I put the LED? There it is. Put the LED, and this is probably the most error-prone part of putting this together, is getting the orientation of the LED. See, that's interesting. Fortunately, on the picture he includes, he indicates that this is the anode, this is the cathode, positive, negative, because the silkscreen does not have that, which is interesting. I wonder why the software he used for this did not do the standard either flat spot or plus or minus side. So I'll drop the LED in there. I'm not going to solder it or trim it or do anything, of course, right now, because we've got to get the panel on. I also think there's another little piece of something or other. Didn't I see another little piece of something or other? Oh, okay, so he's going through the steps for a clear acrylic panel, which we don't have. So the first thing he would like us to do is take a jack and take the screw off the nut off the jack, put it through the Mod CV hole, and put the nut on it. We're not going to do it. Very tightly. What is? I'm sorry. It appears. This section appears to have some older instructions that related to a two-piece panel. As you can see, he's got a picture of a clear plastic panel that is sandwiched behind the color panel, and that was not included in the kit that I got. It may be obsolete, and he hasn't had the opportunity to update the guide yet, but it's a little funny, and I wonder why he's not using that anymore. But you've seen everything that came out of the bag. Okay, he's doing this in an interesting way. I don't typically do this way, but I'm going to see. He wants to put all the jacks on the panel, and then we'll mount the panel on the rest of the stuff, where I typically solder everything, or do it the other way, and in fact I think I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it my way, because it's this, I don't like this way of doing this, primarily because the jack ground pins, it takes a lot more effort to get them in the right place, and it's not what I want to do. If you are not comfortable deviating from the directions, that's certainly fine. And again, I do it slightly differently than he does. Okay, that is pretty good. I'm going to do one of these switches. So what I do is I do what I just did and get two components at opposite ends down, and we get a ruler. So I'm going to tack this mod jack down. Actually, I'm going to do this switch first because it's easier. Okay. No, it's not going anywhere. And now I'm going to, I'm not going to do again. I'm doing it a different way because I've done, well, as you can see from my channel, I've done quite a few of these, including all the ones that I never videotaped or recorded. So I'm going to go ahead and solder all the connections, and I'll do that in fast playback, and then I'm going to put the panel nuts on the front. That just happens to be the way I work. Now we'll tuck the LED forward so it goes through the hole correctly. There, that's nice and pretty. And we'll tack that down. I'm going to leave the leads on the LED on for just for a little while. Okay, I'm going to put all the panel nuts on now, and I'm going to turn the cameras off for that. You don't need to see that. You don't want to see that. Okay, so the jacks are all on, or jacks, knobs, switches are all on. All the rotaries turn. Switches all work. Encoder works. The jacks all work. He has one more step in here where you would take some old component leads and put them through the ground holes and solder them to the ground tabs on the jacks. However, the jacks that came with this kit have their own solder pins on them, so you don't have to worry about that unless you don't have that. Okay, this next step, you unscrew this again and you put a 1mm nylon washer onto the screw and replace the standoff. I probably would have wanted to do that before, and as you can see, and obviously I'm not using the washers, but as you can see from this, there is no, or was no 10mm or 1mm or washer in the kit. So I'm going to go see if I have one in my spares. With luck, I do have a spare. I'm not sure why this washer is necessary, but put it on there anyway. And you don't do it on both standoffs, you only do it on one standoff. We're going to do some meter testing here and there. First we're going to check the pin header. Pin 1 and pin 4 of the 4-pin should have, he says, 1.2 k ohm of resistance, and we're getting, can you see that? No, you can't. Let me lay this down flat. So between 1 and 4, I'm getting 1.2, which is good. Let's go into continuity mode, because he says it shouldn't sense anything, and it does not. It does not, so we're all good. So the next step, now we install the knobs. Actually, I'm not going to install the knobs until I've actually put the other board on the back. So the next step is installing the board. So we've got the 2 sets of pin headers, 1 and 2. This one is being more of a pain. Okay, I'll start that one, and then we'll do this one. And the board goes together like so. And all the pin headers meet firmly and correctly, and that capacitor that you have to lay on its side that he didn't tell you had to lay on your side, it's got space now because I did the 45-degree angle on that. Now we'll take 2 silver screws through our enlarged PCB holes and put the knobs on. And I'm assuming, yeah, this one, the black one is flat sided, has got a flat side, so we put that on the encoder. Little clicky turny. These do not have flat sides, and as always, this is the hardest part of any build for me, making sure that I get the index marks on these lined up right. I'm getting my smaller screwdriver so they are all counterclockwise. I like these knobs, they're very nice knobs. Yep, there go the coyotes howling. Okay, so that's the build. It's ready to power up. I'm not going to power it up tonight, but this is the way it looks. And we'll turn it on tomorrow night. Alright, let's see how it works. We've got it in the rack here. I'm going to be triggering frequency changes by a little MIDI keyboard feeding into a Bufaco Midi Thing. Right here is a quad LFO from 4MS that I just finished building, and the build video is not up, but we'll use that for mod input. So let's start with the drone bank, and this first drone is square wave with resonant feedback. I'm just going to go through these banks settings. You can watch the digits change. I'm going to put some LFO in the mod, and mod should change the pitch of oscillator 2. Okay, we'll go through the rest of the bank. Now we're going to switch to a different bank. We're going to go to the R, O, and RB. Or let me see what's coming next. Okay, there's R's.
Okay, we're going to look at some other banks. So I think that gives you a good sampling of what it sounds like and what it can do. As you can tell, most of these are drones, which is just fine, though you may have noticed in the AA bank, those were some pretty straightforward sine waves with modifications that could be added into them. So that's the Hyperfist from Beast-tek. It's a good module. You watch the build. It's a pretty good build. I had some minor quibbles along the way, as you saw. But in general, it's a good droney rack unit. And the, let's go back to the alphas. My shop rack is not really good for press hold buttons. I kind of really like these straight sines, quite frankly. So it's a versatile little unit. Obviously, the mods and then the switch positions make a big difference, and you have to play with them for that. So that's the Hyperfist. Thanks for watching.